Welcome to this episode of Mark Menendez Bass TV. Spring is almost sprung. You can hear my old geese over here on my little pond. They're getting ready for the springtime, and we will too. This will be a masterclass episode of how to catch bass in the spring. You won't want to miss this one. It's going to be full of good information to help you catch bass on Kentucky Lake. Early spring, or is it actually late winter? That's what we've got going on right now. And doggone, it's the best time of the year to catch your biggest bass that you may catch throughout the entire season. And there's certain baits that I use that lean towards catching that bigger bass. I mean, kind of like one of these. That's the old 913 I caught down at St. John's. It ended up on the cover of Bass Times. And catching big fish early in the year, like that one, can propel your daily catches 25, 28, 29 pounds real quick. So how do we go about doing that? We match the hatch. We throw baits that are mimicking what the forage is doing this time of the year. And we are real patient. One of the things I do this time of year, a lot of times, I sit down in my boat. I sit down in the fold down seat. It's not that I'm getting old, because I am getting old. But by the time when we're sitting down, we are by far more patient sitting than we are standing. And you'll take that old size 10 and you put it on that motor guide and you'll go down the bank too fast, and you may leave the best fish in the lake behind you from your trolling motor going on down the lake too fast. So we need to be patient. My favorite way of all to catch a bass this time of year is a suspending jerkbait. That jerkbait's magic. That jerkbait is the only bait in my box that I can pull the fish to me. Now think about that. We've got flipping jigs, and we skip those under boat docks, or we pitch them into buckbrush, or we pitch it into a willow. We've got baits that we throw right down the side, like a thunder cricket or a square bill or whatever. We're going after those fish, but we don't have many baits that pull them to you. And a jerkbait does that. This is a Strike King 300 deep. It's got a relatively deep bill. This bait gets in that 8 to 9 foot range when I've got it on 8-pound test line. You say 8-pound test line, my gosh, Mark, that's awful light. We're fishing in cold water, and the bass don't pull that hard. You might get a smallmouth going that way for a little distance, but that 8-pound test line will wrestle him real quick. The reason I use 8 with a jerkbait is it gets it down deeper, which means that's less distance that fish has to come and see my bait. And the 8-pound line really gives some subtle action to a jerkbait. Just a little quiver, just like kind of dying quiver, or just something that's a little more attractive to that bass. Now with this jerkbait, I'm looking for areas on Kentucky Lake that have a relative little flat spot that taper off into deep water quick. It's pretty easy to find bass this time of the year because we know most of the bass are in the main body of the lake. They might be on the first, possibly the second major point in a cove, so we can confine our search to the main lake and the first or second primary point in the bay. There'll be a bass or two in the back of the bay, but I'm not really interested in catching that one because he's probably not going to be a real big fish. Most of the bait is still out on the main lake. Most of your big fish are on the main lake. The jerkbait mimics a dying shad, whether it's a gizzard shad or a threadfin shad. And the cool thing about this 300 deep is when it stops and suspends, it stops in a head down position. That head down position on a gizzard shad, when it's cold or it's stunned or it's dying, tells that bass, that predator, hey, that's an easy meal. And that's what this mimics. Your job as an angler is to figure out how hard to make the pulse or to the twitch when you twitch it, and how long to make that pause. How hard to twitch it and how long to pause. Sometimes when the water temperature is in that 41, 42 degree water temperature, that pause after I jerk it about twice, I may let it sit there 15 or 18 seconds. That's a long time. And if I'm standing up, I won't be paying attention. I won't keep direct line contact with my jerkbait. And by sitting, I can let it sit there for 20 seconds without a problem. Generally, that I start with a 3 to 5 second pause, and that's generally enough, but sometimes it has to be more. So you have to figure that out each day, and hour to hour. It changes a lot. But the jerkbait is one in which catches those larger fish. I lean on this thing heavy this time of the year. I won my first national event years ago on the Tennessee River with a jerkbait, outpaced the field by 7 pounds by sitting down and fishing slow. All species of bass love this thing. Brown bass love it, green bass love it, and the ones with spots will eat it too. So we're mimicking the hatch, and this is the first thing I go to, especially in that clear water. The only caveat to a jerkbait is it's got to have some visibility. You've got to be able to see that bait with your naked eye. Somewhere between 15 and 18 inches is about the minimum in which a jerkbait is a very productive bait. A jerkbait is a visible thing. They see that flash, they see the shape, they see it in the head down position, and they're like a kitty cat. When I jerk that thing down and it just pauses, that fish sees it, and he just moves a little closer. And I twitch it again, he moves a little closer. And I twitch it again, he runs up there and he eats it. Big bass and a jerkbait are synonymous this time of year. Water temperatures warm up, and we start getting temperatures in the 45 to 48 to 50 degree range. The bass metabolism gets to moving a little faster, so they'll chase a little more. Will they run something down that you're reeling real fast? Not necessarily, but they'll certainly move quick enough and react to a crankbait very well. There are 2 crankbaits in my tackle box that are my absolute favorites this time of the year. One's a relatively small bait. It's a Strike King Series 3. Little guy right here runs about 6 feet deep. Man, is this a great little bait. Bounces off a cover well. I love the shape of the bill. It's got a rounded bill, kind of like the shape of my thumb. And that means that bait will bounce off rocks and not get hung near as often as a bait that has a relatively narrow bill. A relatively narrow bill will put it right inside that rock, and you'll stay hung up so much. The other bait I really love, and it's a bigger bait, and this is a Strike King Series 4. Still got that big rounded lip, but this is a bigger bodied bait with a bigger, wider searching wobble. Moves a lot of water. This is the bait I go to when we get a lot of rain. Muddies up our waters. The fish can't see quite as well. They start relying on their other senses, their sense of sound with their lateral line. And this bait they can find. Again, this bait does have that capability of bouncing off those rocks and not getting hung very often. But the cool thing is this bait dives a little bit deeper. The Series 3, it's a solid 6-foot diver with 10-pound test line on it. The Series 4 with 12-pound test line, it'll get in that 10-foot range. Day to day, those fish will move up and down in the water column, and sometimes you just have to use a bigger bait. This Series 4 is a great way to get down there in that 8 to 10 foot of water when those fish just won't slide up. Or you're fishing at the most magical moment of every winter day, and that is daybreak. At daybreak, our bass tend to go on a feeding frenzy. Why is that? Because at night in cold water, they're not as effective feeders as they are when water temperatures are warmer. So they kind of go hungry all night long. Then all of a sudden the sun starts to break, the bass move up and get into a shallower position, basically on that little flat spot I talked about earlier, and where it falls off, they move up in the water column, and it's game on from daylight till about 9 o'clock. Some of my very best catches in the late winter, early spring come at this time period. Now, sometimes you got to be pretty tough. Wind is blowing, the water's cold, you're dealing with your rods and reels, icing up in the line guides. It can be really tough, but it can be amazingly productive as that low light goes to a little bit warmer light and those fish get a bite to eat for the first time all night long. I find groups of fish really fire at that time. You'll have a squadron of 8 or 10 or 12 bass on a corner of a point or down a riprap wall or wherever it may be. And those fish get active really quick and they become very easy to catch. The toughest part about it is being out there in the cold. The Series 3 is one that I really like because we don't have a lot of cover left in our lake. Wood cover, that is. Brush piles get put in, stake beds by the state get put in, things like that. But we don't have a lot of natural stumps and natural wood in our water. Growing up, I fished a lot of lay-down trees in the spring. I fished a lot of big stumps. Well, they've just rotted and gone. So what I'm looking for now are rock transitions Transition of rocks with may be as big as my fist to about the size of a golf ball. From a golf ball to a marble, from a marble to little bitty gravel size. Those little lines of transition are about all we have left. So as you're going down the bank on these points, on these corners, and you see a definitive change in the size of the rock, 20 yards either side of that, hey, that is what our fish tend to hold on this time of year. That Series 3 goes through those rock changes so well, very seldom gets hung and bounces off of covers so well. You still, as an angler, with a crankbait, you have to make the bait deflect. You've got to have it hitting the bottom. And it's not at Mach 1 like we do with a 6XD out there on a ledge. You get it down to the bottom and you slow it up just so that you can feel it hitting the bottom, and it hits that rock and it does that deflection, boom, you get a bite, just like you do out on the ledge in the summertime when you're cranking the big plug. That's your job, is to make sure you choose a crankbait that gets to the productive depth. 6 to 8 feet is a really good depth. Our waters have cleaned up so much on Kentucky Lake over the years that these fish are holding a hint deeper than they used to. So don't be afraid to use that little bit larger crankbait when you're out there chasing them on these rock areas. I've spent years on Kentucky Lake, hours upon hours, days upon days this time of the year. And one of the cool things that happens as water temperatures get on up into that, say 55 to 58 degree range, water levels are starting up. They're not up to full pool yet. So we're in that 357, 358 range. You see the bushes back there, and you really want that water to get to those bushes, but it hadn't yet. One of the things that happens is the fish filter on into the bays, and they basically stop either coming in on a creek channel basis, or they come in from point to point to point, I feel like. They get to their little spawning pocket, and they say, okay, I'm going to live here for a while. And daily migrations start to happen. Not from the point all the way to the back of the bay, but in that little point of that small pocket. In the mornings, they'll be out there on that point. Water temperature will be a little bit cooler. It'll be, a degree or two cooler. And as the day goes on, those male bass will start venturing into the back of that pocket on the sides of that pocket. And this is a time that I do a lot of cranking. I do a lot of moving, so I use some faster baits. One is a lipless bait, the old red-eyed shad. I use 2 different sizes. I'll use the half-ounce version, and I'll use the 3/4 ounce version. You can see that these two are just a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller. One is, the top one's the half, the bottom's the 3/4. But I'll use these baits to cover a lot of water. I look into the back of a pocket, a spawning pocket. I look back there towards the back, and I see the last little bit of verticality on each side, and then I see the bottom kind of flatten out behind it. That's the area where that bass is going to migrate to. If I've got gravel on it, that's perfect. If I've got a piece of wood on it, that's great. If I've got a boat dock back there, that's great. Those fish move to that point every day, sometime during the day. And that migration, doggone it, it might only be 50 yards. It could be as much as 100 yards. But each day they'll start on the mouths of the little pockets and slide their way back in there. A lipless bait's a great way to go. Your job, again, is to create a deflection or create something that makes that bass react to it. We're fishing around a lot of gravel and rocks, so these baits don't get hung too bad in that. So I'll take it and I'll just drag it on the bottom. Loud noise. And I'm dragging it and it's kicking those rocks. It deflects a little bit. But better than that, once I get into those zones, one of my favorite presentations is a lift and fall. I'll throw it out and I'll rip it up. And the bait will fall. The bass will hit it on the fall. The cool thing about a red-eyed shad, unlike so many lipless baits that we have, it falls in a horizontal fashion like this. It doesn't fall in a head-down position. That horizontal position gives that bass just enough time to hone in on it and eat it. If I'm in an area where I've got bigger fish, I go to the 3/4, just a bigger profile. Now, one thing I want you to notice is these are both fluorescent red. I wish I could give you a scientific reason why fish react in the pre-spawn to this red color. Crayfish get red, yes. Bluegill, I don't know if they get reds to them or not. I don't think they do. But this hot fluorescent color, these fish can see it, they react to it well. Hot chartreuses, hot oranges, but hot red and orange combinations. This is a chili crawl, this is just a red crawl. They outproduce just about every color bait I have in my box, especially when you have a little bit of stain in the water. This time period of spring, waters are starting to come up. We've started to have some major rains. We get a little flush in the back of the bay. So we start getting a little color in the lake, and these reds really, really outproduce any other color.
For 75 years, Skeeter has been engineering boats like no other, proven with 21 consecutive NMMA Consumer Satisfaction Awards. And that tradition is memorialized with the 75th Anniversary FXR 21 Apex, the ultimate boat with virtually every premium feature, exclusive colors, badging, flooring, celebrating 75 years of engineering boats like no other. Experience one for yourself at your local dealer. Learn more at SkeeterBoats.com.
Hi, I'm Mark Zona. What? I'm Mark Zona. Well, I need a performance braid for finesse presentations. And I need a performance braid for power fishing. Seaguar Smackdown High-Vis Flash Green lets me see line movement for those subtle bites. Smackdown Low-Vis Stealth Gray blends in to make my presentations more natural. Both are 8 strands in a perfectly round weave. And for me, it's the longest casting and quietest braid on the planet. Smackdown Braid from Seaguar. Always the best.
When you go out skipping, trying to learn, it's not about catching fish. Will it help you catch fish? Yes. Will it help you catch more and bigger fish? Yes. But there's something about when you go out and try to learn and you get the right equipment and you skip, slam out of sight, and you can't see it, you feel like you won. Whether you caught one or not, skipping downright makes you feel good when you skip a bait, slam out of sight.
The tour is back.
Yeah!
Pro-inspired, pro-designed, tested and proven by legends on the water, dominating the tournament trail for over 50 years. Everything you need, one legendary brand. Strike King.
This is one of my absolute favorites. I love a big spinnerbait. This catches better than average quality fish. This is a 1/2 ounce Hack-A-Tack spinnerbait, and I have upsized the blade from a 4.5 to a 5. And why did I do that? To give that bait just a hint of lift so that I can slow that bait and I keep it down in the water column, keep it down. This big number 5 spinnerbait blade from Strike King, it throws a lot of flash. And the way I like to fish this is I keep the bait down just enough below the surface of the water that I can just see this gold blade flashing. And I call that highlighting. It's so neat that I can just barely see that blade. I'm rolling it slow. This big bait, big rage grub on the back of it, moving a lot of water, and I come by a piece of that cover that's right there where those big fish are staged up. It is a vicious bite, and it's always a good quality bite. Kentucky Lake has really come back in the past several years, and we've got lots of numbers of bass, but we have a tremendous amount of 3.5 to 4 pound bass in the lake right now. This one will get those fish. The one thing I always do on a spinnerbait is I keep a trailer hook on it. Now this can be a little bit of a headache when you're fishing in and around cover, but I catch about 40 to 50% of the fish I catch on a spinnerbait come by and swipe the back end, and I've got that little trailer hook sitting on the back there. I want it free swinging, and it gets so many of them for me. Then when water temperatures or water levels get up there and those fish get stable in and around any cover they can find to spawn, This is a time that you can catch a lot of bass here in Kentucky Lake. This time of year, it's going to be, the end of April, 1st of May. Doggone it, you can still catch 30 to 50 bass a day. They may not all be keepers, but you're going to catch a lot of keepers. And my favorite little go-to bait right here is a Strike King Game Hog. I Texas rig this. I'll Carolina rig this some too with a short Carolina rig. This little bait has a good profile, moves a lot of water, and there's something about this hog style bait that spawning fish really, really react well to. I don't know whether it is more of a bluegill type shape, whether it's a crawfish type shape on the bottom, but paired with either a 1/4 or a 5/16 ounce weight, I can pitch it in the bushes, around the bushes, and get those fish to bite. One of the things I like to do with it is stay off the bank a little bit with it. And pitching it with a 5/16, I'll hop this thing down in the backs of little pockets, down the sides of those pockets, and find those fish that are actually spawning without a piece of cover nearby. They're just using the bank to spawn around in that 4 to 5 to 6, 7 feet of water. That time of the year, man, you can have some great days. But the one caveat I will tell you is you need to start watching the water level 2 or 3 days prior to your fishing trip. Most of us only get to fish on Saturdays and Sundays. I'll start looking on Wednesday online and see what the Kentucky and Barkley Lake water levels are doing. If the water level is up there at, let's say, 360.3, man, I know I'm going to the bushes. But if that falls to 360, that 3 inches, that's only that much, man, that will pull those fish out from those bushes, and they will be out away from the bushes a little bit. So a little bit of water level going up will keep those fish moving and very comfortable in the bushes. So if you know the day that you're going to get a chance to go and the water level's fallen the day before, back up just a little bit, cast to those bushes, and work that bait out in front of those bushes, and you'll be successful. Well, I hope you passed your master class today on Kentucky Lake spring fishing. Hey, this wad of tackle right here, these 5 or 6 baits, will put a lot of bass in your boat. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope it helps you make you a better fisherman. Join us again next time on Mark Menendez Bass TV, where we'll show you some bass catching action, or we'll at least tell you how you might catch some yourself.
Mark Menendez Bass TV is brought to you by Skeeter Boats, Seaguar, Lose, feel the difference, Strike King Lure Company, Motor Guide, never stop. Closed captioning provided by DieSafe.